Hey everyone! So in this video, we're going to be looking at how to make a paint application that also respects symmetry. So basically we want to create something like this where if I draw a picture on one side, it comes on the other, or it replicates everything on all the 4 quadrants and things like that. So we're going to be building this paint application in steps. And the first thing that we're going to do is make a simple paint application like the one we've done many times before with the color scheme that we want. So for this video, I'm using this palette that I found on a website colorhex.com as a reference. The link to this is in the description below as well. You can go here and check out color palettes that you like, or you can just make up your own. So I'm going to start with this, and I want the background of my paint application to be this green color. So let's start by making the very basic of a paint application, meaning if I drag my mouse, I need to see something happen. So I'm going to move this to setup and then add function mouse dragged. And then we can do our line from mouse X, mouse Y to P mouse X and P mouse Y. If you're comfortable with this part of the drawing application already, feel free to skip the next few parts up until where we start actually figuring out how to draw rotational symmetry. Okay, so I have a line here. I'm just going to be using this red color for the line. So that's the stroke, and we can make the stroke weight maybe 5 so that it draws nice thick lines. Perfect. Next, what I want to do is I'm just going to add 2 buttons on the top left so that I can switch between this color and one more color, so maybe this yellow over here. So for that, what I have to go ahead and do is I will have to create a variable for which actually will hold the color of the brush. I'm going to initialize it to this red that we have right now, and in mouse dragged, instead of putting the actual RGB values in stroke, I'm just going to say brush. So it should work the same. Perfect. Then let's draw the buttons to select color. So we'll draw one in the top left of 0, 0, 50, 50. And I'm going to make the fill of this the red color over here, so that the button is the same color. Perfect. And let's remove the stroke. Okay. Now one thing we can do is, you'll see we're noticing this value being used in 2 places, and we'll probably use it once more for when we press the button. So what we can do is we can actually create a variable called red color and initialize red color to this value that we have over here. So then what we can do is, instead of saying brush equals color of this RGB value, we can just say brush equals red color over here. And even in the place where we're drawing the buttons, we don't have to give the RGB value. We can just say red color again. So let's see if this works. Okay, this is still red and this is red. The cool thing is, now if I, let's say, just change this value in one place where the variable is defined, it changes everywhere else as well. Okay, let's take it back to the previous color that we had. Okay. Now I want to create another button. So this was the red button. I want to create another button that is yellow. So let's create a variable for that as well. Let yellow button. And let's initialize the variable yellow button equals color. Let's go copy it from here. There we go. Now remember, color is a special type of variable, so we'll have to do it inside. So we have to initialize it inside setup. You can delete that. So now let's draw the yellow button. I'm just going to copy this over here again. So fill, I will make it yellow color. No stroke is fine, and the rectangle will have to be below the red rectangle. So the X value stays the same, but the Y will become 50. So we have an error over here. So it says yellow color is not defined in line 20. So that makes sense because here I accidentally said yellow button instead of yellow color. Now that's fixed. So errors are very common. When you do get them, just have a look at what it tells you the error is and try and fix it. Okay, so now we have two buttons. They both don't actually do anything because irrespective of pressing them, you'll still get the same red lines. Okay, so let's head over and create a new function called mouse pressed. This is a recap from our previous videos. So if you have any doubts here, go back to the previous videos and check why we're using mouse pressed and how we're deciding the conditions of this if loop. Okay, so for the red button, I want to check if mouse x is greater than 0 and mouse x is less than 50 and mouse y is greater than 0 and it's less than 50. So this means we've pressed inside the red button area. If that gets done, we can say the brush equals red color. And else if someone presses inside the yellow area, we want to make the brush color yellow. So we're going to say else if, and I'm just going to copy the conditions over here into this. Okay. So here the x values will remain the same. The y value will change. So mouse y is greater than 50 and less than 100. And we'll make the brush yellow color. Okay, so when I press, again, we have to be very careful about spellings. So I've said, I forgot the U over here and said red color is not defined. Let's make sure our spellings are correct. Okay. So now when I press this, I can draw a red line. When I press this, I get a yellow line. And when I press this back, it's red again. Okay, so we have our simple paint application working. That's awesome. We've managed to pick the colors we want and make it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to do this with symmetry. So what that means is if I draw a line on the left over here, I want a line to appear symmetrically over here on the right side as well. And the symmetry will be along this center line over here. So imagine there's a line over here. Anything I draw should be the same on both sides like this. Okay, how do we do that? So let's just have a look at this graph over here. If I have a point on the left side over here, which is x and y away from the origin, a symmetric point on the right, like almost a mirror image, right? On the right side will have the same y, but the x value will be different. It will actually be 400 minus the x value of the previous one. So if I'm drawing a line from mouse x, mouse y to p mouse x, p mouse y, to draw a symmetric one, a mirror image on the right side, I should just say 400 minus mouse x and 400 minus p mouse x. So basically extending the logic of the point, right? For a mirror image of the point, we said the x value should be the total width of the canvas minus x. So that's what we've done here. All the x points we've set 400 minus. Let's see what happens. When I draw here, perfect. We get it on both sides. So a quick note to make here. Right now we're using the value 400. But what happens if we change the size of our canvas over here? What if we make our canvas 500 by 500? Then this line, which won't work anymore. So instead what we can do is, P5 gives us yet another special variable called width and height, which is basically the width and the height of the canvas itself. So instead of saying 400, I can just say width and width in both these places. We don't need the height right now because it doesn't matter yet. So if I run this code, it works. And the cool thing is, even if I change the size of the canvas to, let's say, 600 and 600, it still works. It wouldn't have worked if I'd said 400 over here. So now we have this working, but we want this to be an option. We don't want it to draw two lines all the time, only when we choose for it to be symmetric. So how do we make choices? We make choices with buttons. So let's go ahead and add another set of buttons. Maybe this time it can be on the right side. And let's just maybe add text in each of the buttons so that it says 1, 2 and 4. So if we click 1, then it'll draw a single line. If we click 2, it'll draw a symmetric line like what we're seeing right now. And if we click 4, it should draw on all 4 quadrants. Let's get to 4 in the end. So for now, let's create 2 more buttons. I'm going to add that here. First, we'll just draw the buttons. That is the first step. So buttons to select symmetry. So for this, let's take a very light yellow fill from here so that it looks pleasing. And let's draw the rectangle in the right over here. So we just learnt about a variable called width. So we'll use that. We'll say width minus 50. That'll be the top left point. The y-axis will be 0 and height and width will both be 50. Perfect. So we have that over there. We're going to learn a new function right now called text, which actually just writes text in any x and y position. So the syntax for that is actually you put in the text that you want inside quotations like this and then give a x and y value. So I'm going to say width minus 50 as the x value. I'm going to give the height as 20. And for text, you also need to give a stroke. So I'm going to give stroke as black right now. Okay, so we see a 1 over there. Unfortunately, the fill color of that is yellow, so we can't see it very well. So I'm going to make the fill black. So there, we can see the number 1. Now we know it's not in the center, so we can actually play around with these values over here till it sort of appears to be in the center. So I'm going to say width minus 25. Okay, that is in the center. Now this was to get single line. Now let's create the next button that will help us get double line. So the fill color for this will be the same. The rectangle will, however, move down, and I'm going to move it down by 50. And let's see what happens when we do that. We can also move this down by 50, so that'll become 70. And the text will now say 2. Okay, so we have this outline over here because of the stroke that we added here, and we've never added stroke here. That's actually fine because now we can make out a difference between the 2 buttons. So let's add a stroke to the previous button as well. Okay, there we go. So 1, 2, and let's just add the third button that is going to help us draw the radial symmetry that we saw in the beginning. So that's actually going to be get 4 lines. So once again, we're going to move the rectangle down by 50 more. So the Y position changed from 50 to 100. The text will also move down by 50. So 70 plus 50 is 120. And the text can now say 4. Perfect. We have these 3 buttons made. So now that we have the buttons done, we need to actually change some value when these buttons are pressed, right? So let's initialize a variable for that. So I'm going to declare a variable here called number of lines, and I'm going to initialize it to 2 right now, because right now we just learned how to do the double line one. And what we're going to do inside mouse dragged, so this is important. So long we've been using the if inside mouse pressed. Now we're going to start using inside mouse dragged. We're going to say if number of lines equals 2. In an if statement, if we're checking equality, we have to use 2 equal signs. Remember that. So if number of lines is equal to 2, then we'll open and close brackets. And these 2 lines, we will move inside. So now since the number of lines is equal to 2, this should work as it's been working for so long. Yeah. Perfect. Now you'll see that this got suddenly thicker here when we were drawing. That's because at some point we set the stroke weight to 5, and that affected everything in draw as well. So very quickly in draw, let's just say stroke weight is 1. Let's make sure everything's working again. Okay. Okay, so what have we done? We said number of lines, we've created a variable, initialized it to 2, and inside mouse drag, we're saying if number of lines equals 2, draw 2 lines. Now the thing is, if number of lines is equal to 1, nothing will happen right now. So I just made it 1. Nothing is happening because we don't have a statement here telling what to do when the mouse is dragged and number of lines is 1. So that's what we have to do now. So we can say else if number of lines equals 1. We just want to draw one line at mouse x, mouse y, and p mouse x, p mouse y. So we'll just copy this. So that means if the number of lines is 1, we get 1 line. And if I change it to 2, we'll get 2 lines. Perfect. Now obviously we don't want to keep changing it in setup like this. We want the buttons to do the changing. So let's go down to mouse pressed where we're working with buttons, and we'll continue adding conditions for these new buttons that we've added. So we'll say else if, since we already have 2 if statements, and I'm just going to copy this over here. Once again, we practiced buttons in a previous video, so if you have questions about why these values are as they are, feel free to go back and refresh. Okay, so for this button that says 1, we want mouse x to be greater than width minus 50 and mouse x to be less than width. Again, we're just getting into the habit of using width and height instead of using the actual numbers itself. Because if we change the canvas size, we still need everything to work. And mouse y greater than 0 and mouse y less than 50. So if we press this button, then we want to do number of lines equals 1. So when we're giving it a value, we use a single equal to, but when we're checking value, we use double equal to. Very important to remember. Now let's also just write this for the button that says 2. So for that, the x values that we're checking is the same. The y value, however, will be greater than 50 and less than 100. That's the case. We want number of lines to be equal to 2. So when we start, it's 1 in red color. We still have the capacity to change color. I can click on 2 over here, and you can see it's drawing symmetric lines. If I click 1 again, it's drawing just 1 line and nothing on the left side. Perfect. So we've already managed to create symmetry like this. Now let's add the last symmetry, that is 4 lines. For that, first we can add a condition for the button. Essentially, this button, the x values are the same as the previous one. The y has to be greater than 100 and less than 150. That's the case. The number of lines is 4. But what do we do when the number of lines is 4? That is not been defined yet in mouse dragged. Else, if number of lines equals 4, we need to draw 4 lines now. So I'm just going to copy these 2 to start with. But where are the other 2 points? How do we measure them? So similar to how if we drew a point on the left, its mirror image on the right was basically width minus x value. Similarly, if we want to draw something below, the value will basically be height minus y value. So basically, if we draw a line and mouse x, height minus mouse y, p mouse x and height minus p mouse x, we will get a line that is symmetric below. So let's just check if that works. I'm going to click on 4. So there, we got this below one over here. Lastly, we need to draw one in the bottom right quadrant. And for that, we basically have to say instead of mouse x, mouse y, it'll be width minus mouse x and height minus mouse y. And then width minus p mouse x and height minus p mouse y. So if I click 4, we now have all the symmetry. So you can now basically change your color, change the number of lines, symmetric lines you want, and you can make drawings like this. right? And you can even just sort of mix them up to create drawings where there's a bit of symmetry and sometimes there isn't. Like in this case, maybe you want to write something. This is a butterfly. It's a very quick drawing of a butterfly. But if you want to write something, you don't want symmetry, right? So you can click 1 then. If you want symmetry, you can change this. So go ahead and try this out. Try making something with symmetry, multiple brushes. And as a bonus, try and add an eraser so that if you don't like something, you can erase it and redraw over that part alone. So have fun, try it out, and we're excited to see what you make. Thank you.